The baby's cry cut through the silence of the abandoned barn like a knife, and Emma Jennings clamped her hand over her daughter's mouth before the sound could carry across the Kansas plains. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself deeper into the shadows, listening for the sound of horses or the voices of her husband's brothers who'd been hunting her for 3 days straight. The September heat of 1879 made the barn feel like an oven, and sweat dripped down her spine as she rocked little Rose, trying desperately to soothe her back to sleep. She'd made it 200 miles from her husband's family ranch in western Kansas, but it wasn't far enough. It would never be far enough as long as those men drew breath. Emma had married Thomas Jennings when she was 18, believing his promises of a good life and a loving home. For the first few months, he'd been kind enough, but the truth revealed itself slowly like a wound going septic. The Jennings family ran their cattle operation with an iron fist and expected absolute obedience from everyone under their roof. When Thomas died in a riding accident 6 months ago, Emma thought she might finally have a chance at freedom. Instead, his older brother Clayton declared that she and the baby belonged to the family now, that she'd marry him whether she liked it or not, and that he'd raise Rose as his own daughter. The way Clayton looked at her made her skin crawl. The way he talked about owning her, controlling every aspect of her life, made her blood run cold. So 3 nights ago, when the family had gathered for dinner and the whiskey was flowing freely, Emma had packed what little she could carry, wrapped Rose in a blanket, and slipped out into the darkness. She'd taken one of the horses, knowing they'd call it theft, knowing they'd come after her with fury in their hearts. Rose squirmed in her arms, and Emma realized she'd been holding her too tightly. She loosened her grip and whispered soft reassurances, though her own terror threatened to choke her. The baby was only 4 months old, too young to understand the danger they were in, too young to know that her uncles wanted to use her as a chain around Emma's neck. Outside the barn, Emma heard the distant sound of a horse approaching. Her entire body went rigid. She'd chosen this abandoned homestead because it looked like no one had lived here in years, the house nothing but a shell, with a caved-in roof and the barn listing to one side. She'd thought it would be safe to rest here for a few hours to let Rose eat and sleep before they continued toward Leavenworth. She'd heard there was a church there that helped women in difficult circumstances, and she'd been praying every step of the way that they could make it. The horse came closer, and Emma's mind raced through her options. She could try to run out the back, but Rose would surely cry and give them away. She could hide in the hay, but if they searched thoroughly, they'd find her. She'd left the horse she'd stolen tied up behind the barn, and any tracker worth his salt would spot it immediately. The footsteps were slow and measured, not the rushed sound of multiple men hunting, just one person. Emma held her breath as a shadow fell across the barn's entrance. The door creaked open, and a shaft of late afternoon sunlight cut through the darkness. "I know someone's in here," a man's voice called out, rough but not unkind. "Saw the horse out back. If you're in trouble, I might be able to help." Emma didn't move, didn't breathe. It could be a trick. Clayton was cunning enough to send someone ahead, someone who might seem trustworthy. "I'm not looking to hurt anyone," the voice continued. "Name's William Kane. I run cattle about 5 miles north of here. This used to be my uncle's place before he passed." William Kane. Emma didn't recognize the name, which meant he probably wasn't connected to the Jennings family. She shifted slightly, trying to get a better look at the stranger without revealing her position. Through a crack in the boards, she could make out a tall figure silhouetted against the light, broad-shouldered and wearing the typical attire of a working cowboy. Rose chose that moment to let out a small whimper, and Emma knew their hiding spot had been compromised. She stood slowly, keeping the baby close to her chest, and stepped out of the shadows. The man turned toward her, and she got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 25 years old, with dark hair that needed a trim and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His clothes were dusty from work, and his hat was pushed back on his head. What struck her most were his eyes, a clear gray that seemed to assess her situation in an instant. Those eyes moved from her disheveled appearance to the small bundle in her arms, then to the fear that must have been written plainly on her face. "Are you running from someone?" William asked, his voice gentle despite its roughness. Emma's throat felt tight. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust this stranger, but she was exhausted and desperate and nearly out of options. "Yes," she whispered. "The baby's father?" "My husband is dead," Emma said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "His family wants to force me into another marriage. They want to control my daughter's life. I won't let them." William was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "The Jennings clan by any chance?" Emma's eyes widened. "You know them?" "Know of them," William said, and there was something dark in his expression. "They've got a reputation for being hard people. Your husband was Thomas Jennings?" She nodded, surprised that he'd made the connection so quickly. "I heard he died. I'm sorry for your loss." William stepped further into the barn, moving slowly as if approaching a skittish horse. "How long have they been tracking you?" 3 days. I thought I'd lost them yesterday, but I can't be sure." Emma's arms tightened around Rose. "I'm trying to get to Leavenworth. I heard there's help there." "Leavenworth's still 60 miles east," William said. "And if the Jennings men are tracking you, they'll expect you to head for town. They'll have someone watching the roads." Emma felt her hope crumbling. "Then what am I supposed to do?" William looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the wheels turning in his mind. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. "My ranch. It's small. Just me and 2 hired hands, but it's defensible. More importantly, the Jennings don't know I've got any connection to you. They'll never find you there." "They'll never find you there," he repeated, and there was a conviction in his voice that made her want to believe him. "You don't even know me," Emma said. "Why would you risk bringing trouble to your door?" "Because I've heard enough stories about Clayton Jennings to know what kind of man he is," William replied, "and because no woman should have to run like a hunted animal just to keep her child safe." Emma felt tears pricking at her eyes. She'd been running on pure adrenaline and terror for days, barely sleeping, always listening for pursuit. The offer of genuine help felt almost too good to be true. "If they find out you helped me, they'll come after you too." "Let them try." There was steel in William's voice now. "I've dealt with men like Clayton before. The question is, do you trust me enough to come with me? Because standing here debating it is wasting time you don't have." Rose began to fuss again, and Emma made her decision. She didn't have the luxury of being cautious anymore. "All right," she said, "and we'll come with you." William nodded and moved toward the barn's entrance. "Leave the horse you came on. I'll have one of my hands retrieve it later and return it through intermediaries so they can't say you're a thief. You'll ride with me." Emma gathered her small bag of belongings and followed William out into the fading daylight. His horse was a sturdy roan gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. William mounted first, then reached down to help Emma up. She hesitated only a moment before handing Rose up to him. He held the baby with surprising gentleness, waiting until Emma was settled behind him before carefully passing Rose back to her. "Hold on tight," William said. "We've got some ground to cover before full dark." Emma wrapped one arm around William's waist while keeping Rose secure against her chest with the other. As the horse started forward at an easy lope, she felt the warmth of William's body against hers and the strength in the way he sat the saddle. For the first time in days, she felt something other than pure terror. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close. They rode north across the prairie as the sun sank lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see riders appearing behind them, but the landscape remained empty. William seemed to know every fold and dip in the land, using the terrain to keep them out of sight from the main roads. "How long have you had your ranch?" Emma asked after a while, more to break the silence than anything else. "About 3 years," William replied. "Inherited the land from my uncle, the one who owned that homestead where I found you. He died without any other family, and I was working as a ranch hand at the time, so I took the opportunity to start building something of my own." "Is it hard running a place by yourself?" It's a lot of work, William admitted, but I've got good help. Jack and Samuel are brothers, been working with me for 2 years now. They're trustworthy, if that's what you're worried about. It was exactly what she'd been worried about, and Emma was grateful he'd addressed it directly. And you think they won't mind me showing up? They'll follow my lead, William said. Besides, Samuel's wife died in childbirth last year. He might find some comfort in having a baby around the place again. Emma felt a pang of sympathy for this unknown man. I'm sorry for his loss. Life out here is hard, William said simply. We do what we can to help each other through it. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Emma felt Rose growing heavy in her arms as the baby drifted off to sleep. The rocking motion of the horse was soothing, and despite her fear, Emma found her own eyes growing heavy. She jerked herself awake, afraid of falling, but William must have felt her movement because he spoke quietly. Go ahead and rest if you need to. I won't let you fall. I shouldn't, Emma said, but her exhaustion was overwhelming. She'd barely slept in 3 days, catching only brief moments of rest when she was certain she was far enough ahead of her pursuers. When's the last time you had a proper meal? William asked. Emma had to think about it. 2 days ago, I had some bread and cheese I'd packed. Soon as we get to the ranch, we'll get some food into you, William said firmly. Can't have you fainting from hunger. The care in his voice made Emma's throat tighten. She didn't know this man, had met him less than an hour ago, yet he was showing her more kindness than her own husband's family ever had. Why are you really doing this? She asked softly. William was quiet for a moment. My mother ran from my father when I was about 10 years old, he finally said. He was a mean drunk, liked to use his fists. She took me and my little sister and we ran in the middle of the night. A family took us in, hid us until my father gave up looking. They saved our lives, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to do the same for someone else, I would. Where's your mother now? Emma asked. She and my sister live in Denver. Mother remarried a few years back, a good man who treats her right. My sister's engaged to a shopkeeper. There was warmth in William's voice when he talked about them. I send them money when I can, visit when I'm able. Emma absorbed this information, understanding now why William had been so quick to offer help. He knew what it was like to run, to be hunted. Thank you, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Don't thank me yet, William replied. We've still got to make sure the Jennings men don't find you. As darkness fell, Emma saw lights appearing in the distance. William guided the horse toward them, and gradually she could make out the shapes of buildings, a ranch house, a barn, several outbuildings. It wasn't a large operation, but it looked well-maintained and solid. 2 men emerged from the barn as they approached, lanterns in hand. Both were in their 30s, one tall and lanky, the other more compact and muscular. They looked surprised to see William carrying passengers. Boss, the taller one said, wasn't expecting you back with company. William dismounted and reached up to help Emma down. She slid from the saddle carefully, trying not to jostle Rose. Jack, Samuel, this is Emma Jennings and her daughter Rose. They'll be staying with us for a while. Emma, this is Jack Harrison and his brother Samuel. The 2 men exchanged glances, and Emma saw the questions in their eyes, but they didn't voice them. Madam, Jack said, tipping his hat. Welcome. The Jennings family might come looking for her, William said bluntly. If anyone asks, we haven't seen her, understood? Samuel's expression darkened. That Clayton Jennings? Among others, William confirmed. Then they won't hear a word from us, Samuel said firmly. Any enemy of that family is a friend of ours. Emma felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thank you, she said to both men. Let's get you inside, William said, placing a hand on the small of Emma's back and guiding her toward the house. Jack, can you see to my horse? Sure thing, boss. The ranch house was modest but comfortable, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area and 2 smaller rooms branching off from it. William lit several lamps, and Emma could see the space was clean and well organized if lacking a woman's touch. The furniture was simple but sturdy, clearly built to last. You can have my room, William said, gesturing toward one of the doors. I'll sleep in the barn with Jack and Samuel. I can't take your room, Emma protested. Yes, you can, William said. You need privacy and a real bed. Besides, I've slept in worse places than a barn. He moved to the stove and started building up the fire. Let me get some food going. There's salt pork and beans, some cornbread from yesterday. Emma sat down in one of the chairs, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. Rose was still sleeping against her chest, tiny features peaceful in the lamplight. She looked so much like Thomas, with the same dark hair and the same little nose. Emma hoped desperately that Rose wouldn't inherit the Jennings temperament along with their features. William worked efficiently in the kitchen, and before long he had a pot of beans heating on the stove and the salt pork sizzling in a pan. The smell made Emma's stomach growl audibly, and William smiled at the sound. When's the baby due for feeding? He asked. She'll wake up hungry in a few hours, Emma said. I've been nursing her, but my milk has been coming in less with all the stress. We've got a milk cow, William said. If you need to supplement, we can manage that. Emma nodded gratefully. She'd been worried about what would happen if her milk dried up completely, with no way to feed Rose. William brought her a plate of food and a cup of water, and Emma ate ravenously, barely tasting the simple fare. It didn't matter that it wasn't fancy. It was hot and filling, and she needed it desperately. William ate standing up, leaning against the counter, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You should get some sleep, he said when she'd finished. I'll show you the room. Emma followed him to the bedroom, which contained a simple bed with a thick quilt, a dresser, and a chair. It was sparse but clean, and the bed looked like heaven to Emma's exhausted body. There's water in the pitcher if you need to wash up, William said. Outhouse is out back, but I'd recommend using the chamber pot under the bed tonight. Don't want you outside in the dark where someone might spot you. All right, Emma said. She looked up at William, this stranger who'd become her unlikely savior. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this. You don't need to repay me, William said. Just rest and let yourself heal. We'll figure out the next steps tomorrow. He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and Emma was alone with her daughter for the first time in what felt like forever. She laid Rose down gently on the bed, building a little nest of pillows around her to keep her from rolling, then took a few moments to wash her face and hands in the basin. The water was cool and refreshing, and she felt some of the grime and fear washing away with it. Emma changed Rose's diaper, grateful that she'd packed several cloth ones in her bag, then laid down beside her daughter on the bed. The mattress was comfortable, the quilt soft, and the room felt safe in a way nothing had felt safe for days. Emma closed her eyes and let herself drift, listening to Rose's gentle breathing and the distant sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. She woke several times to feed Rose, each time listening fearfully for the sound of approaching horses, but the night remained quiet. When dawn light began filtering through the small window, Emma felt more rested than she had in weeks. Though her nerves were still stretched tight, there was a gentle knock on the door, and William's voice called softly, Emma, you awake? Yes, she replied, making sure she was decent before telling him to come in. William entered carrying a tray with coffee, fresh bread, and butter. Thought you might like some breakfast, he said. How did you sleep? Better than I expected, Emma admitted. Has there been any sign of them? Nothing, William said. Jack rode out before dawn to scout the area. No tracks, no riders. If they're looking for you, they haven't come this direction yet. Emma felt a small measure of relief, though she knew it was too early to feel safe. What happens now? William sat down in the chair, his long legs stretched out in front of him. I've been thinking about that. The way I see it, you've got a few options. You can keep heading for Leavenworth, but that's risky. Or you can stay here for a while, at least until things cool down. I can put it about that I've hired a housekeeper, which wouldn't be unusual. Most folks around here mind their own business, and the Jennings ranch is far enough west that we don't have much interaction with them. You'd let me stay? Emma asked, surprised despite everything. Why not? The house could use a woman's touch, and I'm a terrible cook. If you're willing to help out around the place, it would be a fair trade. William's gray eyes met hers steadily. More importantly, it gives you time to figure out your next move without running yourself ragged. Emma looked down at Rose, who was beginning to wake up, her little face scrunching up in preparation for a cry. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door," she said quietly. "Trouble comes whether you invite it or not," William replied. "At least this way, it's trouble worth facing." Emma picked up Rose and held her close, thinking through her options. She could keep running, but with a baby in her arms and no money, she wouldn't get far. Or she could accept William's offer and have a chance to catch her breath to plan properly. "All right," she said finally, "I'll stay, at least for a while. But I'll earn my keep. I'm a good cook, and I can clean and mend, and I'm not afraid of hard work." "I never thought you were," William said with a small smile. "Welcome to the Kane Ranch, Emma Jennings." Over the next few days, Emma settled into a routine that felt almost surreal after the terror of her flight. She woke early to make breakfast for William and the two hired hands, substantial meals of eggs and bacon and fresh bread that the men devoured with obvious appreciation. She cleaned the house thoroughly, finding satisfaction in bringing order to the bachelor dwelling. She mended clothes, tended the small vegetable garden behind the house, and cared for Rose, who seemed to thrive in the stable environment. William was a constant, steady presence. He worked from dawn until dusk, managing the cattle and horses, mending fences, handling the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running. But he always took time to check on Emma, to ask how she was doing, to play with Rose for a few minutes before heading back out to work. Emma found herself watching for him, looking forward to those moments when he'd come in dusty and tired, but with a smile for her and her daughter. Jack and Samuel were kind as well, treating Emma with respect and playing with Rose when they came in for meals. Samuel especially seemed to find comfort in the baby's presence, and Emma often saw him watching Rose with a sad, distant expression that spoke of his own loss. But the fear never fully left Emma. Every time she heard horses approaching, her heart would leap into her throat. Every stranger who passed by on the distant road made her palms sweat. William seemed to understand, never pushing her to relax, always keeping watch. A week after Emma's arrival, Jack came riding back from town with news. "Heard talk in Leavenworth," he said, addressing William while Emma listened from the kitchen. "The Jennings men have been asking questions, offering a reward for information about a woman and a baby." Emma's blood ran cold. "How much of a reward?" $50, Shri," Jack said, and whistled low. "That's a lot of money for most folks around here." "It's also an admission that they're looking for something they don't want the law involved in," William said thoughtfully. "If they had a legitimate claim, they'd go through the sheriff." "What if someone saw me coming here?" Emma asked, fear making her voice shake. "We'll deal with it if it happens," William said calmly. "But you've been careful to stay out of sight, and as far as anyone knows, I hired a housekeeper from back east. There's no reason for anyone to connect you with the woman they're looking for." Emma wanted to believe him, but the fear was a living thing inside her chest. That night, after Rose was asleep, she found herself unable to settle. She paced the small bedroom, listening to every sound outside, jumping at shadows. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and went out into the main room. William was still awake, sitting at the table with a lamp burning low, writing in a ledger. He looked up when Emma appeared, concern immediately crossing his face. "Can't sleep?" "Every time I close my eyes, I see Clayton finding us," Emma admitted. "I keep thinking about what he'll do if he takes Rose away from me." William set down his pen and stood. "Come here," he said gently. Emma went to him, and he guided her to sit in one of the chairs by the cold fireplace. He took the other chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Emma, I want you to understand something. As long as you're on this ranch, you're under my protection. The Jennings men would have to go through me to get to you, and I promise you that won't happen easily." "You barely know me," Emma whispered. "Why would you risk so much?" "Because it's the right thing to do," William said simply. "And because I've seen what kind of woman you are this past week. You're strong and capable, and you love your daughter fiercely. That's worth protecting." Emma felt tears spilling down her cheeks. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, but William's kindness was breaking through her defenses. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm so scared all the time." William reached out and took her hand, his palm warm and rough with calluses. "Fear is just proof you've got something worth fighting for," he said, "but you don't have to fight alone anymore." Emma looked at their joined hands, at the way her smaller fingers fit against his larger ones. She looked up at William's face, at the steadiness in his gray eyes and the strength in his jaw. Something shifted in her chest, a feeling that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. "Thank you," she said, squeezing his hand, "for everything." They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, the lamp burning low between them. Emma felt her racing heart begin to slow, the fear receding to a manageable level. With William beside her, the darkness didn't seem quite so threatening. The days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life. She discovered she had a talent for cooking, creating meals that had the men praising her skills enthusiastically. She made curtains for the windows from fabric William brought back from town, brightening up the house considerably. She planted herbs by the kitchen door and started a small flower garden, bringing color and life to the homestead. Rose grew and thrived, becoming more alert and responsive. She smiled her first real smile at William one morning when he was making funny faces at her over breakfast, and Emma felt her heart clench at the sight. William was so gentle with Rose, so patient, always ready to hold her or play with her when Emma needed a break. Emma tried not to think too much about what she was feeling when William was near. She was a widow, still in mourning, and it wasn't appropriate to develop feelings for another man so soon. But her marriage to Thomas had never been a love match, and her heart didn't seem to care about propriety. She found herself noticing the way William's shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the low rumble of his laugh when something amused him. She caught him watching her too, his gaze following her as she moved around the house, an expression in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. But he never said anything inappropriate, never pushed, always maintained a respectful distance even as the air between them seemed to grow charged with unspoken feelings. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after Emma's arrival, William came back from town with a newspaper. His expression was serious as he handed it to Emma. "There's something you need to see," he said. Emma took the paper with trembling hands and found the article he'd marked. It was a notice from the Jennings family declaring that Emma Jennings was mentally unstable and had kidnapped the family's heir, and offering a substantial reward for her return. The notice painted Emma as a dangerous, unbalanced woman who couldn't be trusted with the care of a child. Emma felt sick reading it. "They're trying to make everyone think I'm insane," she said. "If they catch me now, they could lock me away and take Rose, and no one would question it." "Which is exactly why we need to establish your sanity and your rights legally," William said. He pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. "I talked to a lawyer in Leavenworth, a man named Morrison, who doesn't have any connections to the Jennings family. He says that as Thomas's widow, you have full legal rights to your daughter. The family can't just take her away from you." "But they're claiming I'm not fit to care for her," Emma protested. "Which is why Morrison suggests we gather statements from people who can attest to your fitness as a mother," William explained. "Jack, Samuel, and I can all swear that you're perfectly sane and an excellent mother. The local doctor can examine you and Rose and provide a medical opinion. If we build a strong enough case, the Jennings won't have any legal ground to stand on." Emma wanted to hope, but fear held her back. What if it's not enough? What if they find some judge who's in their pocket? "Then we'll fight it another way," William said firmly. "But Emma, you can't run forever. At some point you have to stand your ground." Emma looked at Rose, sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby. She thought about the life she wanted for her daughter, one free from the Jennings family's control. William was right. Running forever wasn't a solution. "All right," she said, "let's do it." Over the next few weeks, William helped Emma build her case. The local doctor, an elderly man named Henderson, came out to the ranch and spent several hours talking with Emma, examining both her and Rose. His report was glowing, declaring Emma to be of sound mind and excellent health, and Rose to be a thriving, well-cared-for infant. Jack and Samuel both provided written statements about Emma's character and capabilities. Even the shopkeeper in Leavenworth, who'd seen Emma on her occasional carefully concealed trips to town with William, provided a letter saying she seemed perfectly rational and devoted to her child. But the real turning point came in mid-November when a rider came to the ranch with unexpected news. The man was a lawyer's clerk, and he carried a message from Morrison. Clayton Jennings had been arrested for cattle theft and assault, caught red-handed stealing from a neighboring ranch and beating the owner when confronted. He was being held in the Leavenworth jail awaiting trial. With Clayton out of the picture, the rest of the family might back off, William said after the clerk had left. He was the driving force behind hunting you down. Emma felt a weight lifting from her chest. Do you really think they'll give up? I think they'll realize they've lost their leverage, William said, especially when Morrison presents them with all the evidence we've gathered of your fitness as a mother. They can't force you into anything now. That night, Emma allowed herself to truly hope for the first time since Thomas's death. She sat in the main room with William after Rose had gone to sleep, the fire crackling in the hearth and the November wind howling outside. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me that day, she said softly. You would have survived, William said. You're stronger than you think, Emma. Maybe, Emma said, but I wouldn't have lived. There's a difference between surviving and having a life worth living. William looked at her intently. And do you have that now? A life worth living? Emma met his gaze, her heart pounding. I'm starting to think I might, she said quietly, thanks to you. The air between them seemed to thicken with tension. William leaned forward slightly and Emma found herself doing the same, drawn by an invisible force. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she knew with sudden certainty that she wanted him to, but William pulled back, standing abruptly and moving to the window. Emma, I need to be honest with you about something, he said, his back to her. Emma's stomach clenched with apprehension. What is it? William turned to face her, his expression serious. I have feelings for you. I've tried to ignore them, tried to tell myself it's just about protecting you and Rose, but it's more than that. I think about you constantly. I look forward to seeing you every morning. When I'm working, I find myself hurrying to get back to the house just to spend a few more minutes in your company. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She'd known on some level that William cared for her, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I know it's too soon, William continued. You're barely past mourning your husband, and I don't want to take advantage of your vulnerable position, but I also can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel. So I'm telling you now, plainly, so there's no confusion. I care for you, Emma, and for Rose. I want you to stay here, not just as my housekeeper, but as my wife, if you'll have me. But I understand if you need time, or if you don't feel the same way. Either way, you and Rose will always have a home here. Emma stood on shaking legs, her mind whirling. She'd known her feelings for William were growing, but she hadn't let herself think about what that might mean for the future. Now he was offering her everything she'd been afraid to want, a home, safety, and a man who clearly loved both her and her daughter. William, she said, crossing the room to stand in front of him, Thomas was never a good husband. Our marriage was one of convenience and obligation, not love. I mourned his death because death is always sad, but I didn't mourn losing him, if that makes sense. William nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. What I feel for you is different from anything I felt for Thomas, Emma continued. You've shown me what it means to be cared for, to be protected without being controlled. You've been kind to my daughter, generous with your home, patient with my fears. I think I started falling for you weeks ago, but I didn't let myself believe it could be real. And now? William asked, his voice rough with emotion. Now I'm ready to stop running from everything, including happiness, Inai, Emma said. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble under her palm. Yes, William Kane, I'll marry you, if you're certain that's what you want. William's answer was to pull her into his arms and kiss her, a kiss that was both tender and passionate, speaking of weeks of restrained longing finally finding release. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body fitting against his as if they were made for each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, William rested his forehead against hers. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this, he promised. I know you will, Emma said, and kissed him again. They married in early December, a simple ceremony in the church in Leavenworth with Jack and Samuel as witnesses. Emma wore a new dress William had bought her, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and she carried a small bouquet of winter wildflowers. Rose attended too, held by Samuel during the ceremony, cooing happily at all the attention. The minister was aware of Emma's situation and had been shown all the documentation proving her fitness as a mother. He'd also been informed of Clayton Jennings' arrest and the family's decision to drop their pursuit of Emma in light of the mounting legal evidence against their claims. The Jennings family had sent a curt letter through Morrison, relinquishing all claims on Rose in exchange for Emma agreeing not to pursue any inheritance from Thomas's estate. Emma had agreed instantly, wanting nothing from them except to be left alone. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration back at the ranch. Jack had prepared a feast, and several neighbors came by to congratulate the new couple. Emma was nervous about meeting so many new people, but they were all kind and welcoming, clearly respecting William and happy to see him settled. That night, after the guests had left and Rose was asleep in her cradle, which they'd moved into the spare room, Emma and William were finally alone as husband and wife. William was gentle and patient, understanding that Emma's experiences with Thomas had not been entirely positive. He took his time, showing her what it meant to be loved by someone who cared about her pleasure as much as his own. Afterwards, lying in William's arms in the darkness, Emma felt truly safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" William asked, his hand stroking her hair gently. "For finding me in that barn," Emma said. "For taking a chance on a desperate stranger. For loving Rose like she's your own." "She is my own now," William said firmly. "Both of you are. I'm going to adopt Rose legally, make her a Kane in name as well as in my heart. If that's all right with you." Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "It's more than all right," she said. "It's everything I could have hoped for." The winter passed peacefully. Emma thrived in her role as William's wife, managing the household and helping with the ranch where she could. Rose continued to grow, becoming more interactive and delightful every day. She started sitting up on her own, then crawling, her personality emerging as cheerful and curious. William was everything Emma could have wanted in a husband. He was patient and kind, working hard to provide for his family, but always making time to be with them. He taught Emma to ride better, to shoot a rifle in case she ever needed to defend herself, to read the weather and the land. He was an attentive father to Rose, completely devoted to her care and happiness. Jack and Samuel continued working the ranch, and both men became like family. Samuel began courting a widow from town, a quiet woman named Martha who had 2 young sons. They married in the spring, and Samuel brought his new family to live in a small house William helped him build on the edge of the ranch property. Jack remained a bachelor, claiming he was too set in his ways for marriage, but he doted on Rose and Martha's boys like a favorite uncle. In May of 1880, Emma discovered she was pregnant with William's child. She'd suspected for a few weeks, recognizing the signs from her pregnancy with Rose, but she wanted to be certain before telling William. When Dr. Henderson confirmed it, Emma felt a surge of joy mixed with nervousness. She'd loved being pregnant with Rose, but her marriage to Thomas had been so unhappy that it had colored the experience. This time would be different. She told William that evening after Rose had gone to bed. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down gently and kneeling to press a kiss to her still flat belly. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Emma asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, William said. He stood and kissed her deeply. You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Emma. A wife I love, a daughter I adore, and now another child. I am the luckiest man in Kansas. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Emma felt wonderful this time, blooming with health and happiness. William was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her overdoing things. Emma found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from a place of love. Rose celebrated her first birthday in July with a party that seemed far too elaborate for a 1-year-old, but William had insisted. He'd made a little wooden horse for her, carefully sanded smooth and painted with bright colors. Rose loved it, carrying it everywhere, and making happy babbling sounds that William insisted were her saying, horse. In November, Emma went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth, much harder than Rose had been, and there were moments when Emma was frightened, but William stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when Dr. Henderson suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. Finally, after nearly 20 hours of labor, their son was born, a healthy baby boy with a powerful set of lungs. They named him Henry Thomas Kane, keeping Thomas's name as a middle name despite everything, because it was still Rose's father's name and Emma wanted her daughter to have that connection. William held his son with tears streaming down his face, looking at Emma with so much love that she felt her heart might burst. He's perfect, William said. You're perfect. I love you so much, Emma. I love you too, Emma said, exhausted but happy. Thank you for giving me this life. Life settled into a new routine with 2 children. Henry was a fussy baby, much more demanding than Rose had been, but William handled the sleepless nights with remarkable patience. He would walk the floor with Henry for hours, singing off key cowboy songs until the baby finally settled. Rose was fascinated by her little brother, always wanting to help care for him, bringing him her toys and patting his head gently. As the years passed, the Kane Ranch prospered. William's hard work and good management paid off, and they were able to expand their herd and improve the property. They built a bigger house to accommodate their growing family, with separate bedrooms for the children and a real parlor for entertaining. Emma planted a proper garden and orchard, and soon they had fresh vegetables and fruit much of the year. Rose grew into a bright, confident child who loved horses and the outdoors. She followed William everywhere when she was allowed, learning about ranching and cattle and the land. Henry was more bookish, preferring to sit with Emma and learn his letters and numbers. Both children were happy and well-adjusted, growing up knowing they were loved and wanted. Emma heard occasional news about the Jennings family over the years. Clayton had been convicted of his crimes and spent several years in prison. When he was released, he left Kansas and was never heard from again. The rest of the family eventually sold their ranch and scattered, apparently unable to hold things together without Clayton's forceful, if cruel, leadership. Emma felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only relief that they were no longer a threat. In 1883, Emma gave birth to another daughter, whom they named Sarah Marie. She was an easy baby, cheerful and content, with William's gray eyes and Emma's dark hair. Rose, now 4 years old, appointed herself Sarah's special protector and took the role very seriously. William continued to be the kind of husband and father Emma had never dared to dream of having. He was present and engaged, teaching his children about the world, playing with them, telling them stories. He supported Emma's interests and ambitions, encouraging her when she started raising chickens for extra income, and later when she began teaching reading and writing to some of the ranch children in the area. They had their struggles, of course. There were years when drought made things difficult, and times when cattle prices fell and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal hardships of life on the frontier, but they faced everything together, their love and commitment never wavering. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December of 1889, William took Emma on a trip to Denver to visit his mother and sister. It was Emma's first time traveling so far from the ranch, and she was nervous but excited. They left the children with Jack and Martha, though Rose, at 10 years old, insisted she was old enough to help care for her younger siblings. In Denver, Emma met William's mother, Margaret, and his sister, Catherine, both of whom welcomed her warmly. Over dinner one evening, Margaret told Emma stories about their flight from William's father and how the family who'd helped them had saved their lives. "William learned from what happened to us," Margaret said. "He learned that helping someone in need is never wrong, even if it's risky. I'm glad he found you, Emma. I'm glad he could pass that kindness forward." "I'm grateful every day that he did," Emma replied. She looked at William across the table, at the man who'd become her whole world. "He saved my life in more ways than one." The trip to Denver strengthened Emma's bond with William's family, and they began exchanging regular letters and visits. Catherine's husband turned out to be a shrewd businessman, and he helped William make some smart investments that further improved the ranch's profitability. The children continued to grow. Rose became an accomplished rider and developed a talent for training horses. William began teaching her the business side of ranching, recognizing her keen mind and natural leadership abilities. Henry remained studious and eventually expressed interest in becoming a lawyer, inspired by stories of how Morrison had helped Emma establish her legal rights. Sarah was still young but showed signs of being artistic, always drawing pictures and making up elaborate stories. In 1892, another son joined the family, Samuel William Kane, named after both Samuel Harrison and William himself. His birth was easier than Henry's had been, and he was a contented baby who rarely fussed. The children all adored him, and the house rang with laughter and life. Emma sometimes thought back to that terrified woman hiding in a barn with a baby in her arms, certain she'd never be safe again. It seemed like another lifetime, another person entirely. That woman had been running from danger with no hope for the future. The woman Emma had become was strong and confident, surrounded by love and building a legacy for her children. She and William would sit on the porch in the evenings after the children were in bed, watching the sunset paint the Kansas sky in brilliant colors. They'd hold hands and talk about their day, about their dreams for the future, about all the blessings they'd been given. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked one evening when they'd been married nearly 15 years. "Taking in a desperate stranger and all the complications that came with it?" William turned to look at her, his gray eyes soft in the fading light. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You and our children are the best things that ever happened to me. That day I found you in the barn was the day my real life began." "Mine too," Emma said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You told me they'd never find me at your ranch, and you were right, but you gave me so much more than just a hiding place. You gave me a home, a real home, and a family built on love instead of obligation or fear." "We built it together," William corrected gently. "You brought light and warmth into my life, Emma. You made this house into a home. You gave me children I'm proud of and a purpose beyond just working the land. Everything good in my life comes from you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear Rose reading to her younger siblings, her voice clear and steady. It was a peaceful sound, the sound of a family safe and happy and together. As the years continued to pass, the Kane Ranch became known throughout the region as a model operation. William's reputation for fair dealing and hard work earned him respect from neighbors and business partners alike. Emma became a pillar of the small community that had grown up around Leavenworth, helping organize schools and churches, assisting families in need, always ready to offer a kind word or a helping hand. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman, confident and capable. When she was 20, she married a rancher's son from a neighboring property, a good man who respected her intelligence and shared her love of the land. They built their own ranch with help from William, and Rose remained closely involved in the family business. Henry went off to study law in Kansas City, fulfilling his dream of helping people the way Morrison had helped his mother. He visited often and always made time for his younger siblings, serving as both brother and mentor to them. Sarah developed her artistic talents and began selling her paintings to shops in Denver and Kansas City. Her work captured the beauty of the Kansas plains and the spirit of frontier life, earning recognition and a steady income. Samuel grew into a strong, quiet young man much like his father, content to work the ranch and be close to family. He showed particular talent with horses, often working alongside Rose to train and sell quality animals. Emma and William's younger children came in steady succession over the years. In 1895, twin daughters arrived, Emma and William's last children. They named the girls Lucy Ann and Grace Elizabeth, and the entire family doted on them. With 6 children in total, the Kane household was always bustling with activity, filled with noise and laughter and life. As Emma approached her 40th birthday in 1899, she took stock of her life and felt nothing but gratitude. She'd come so far from that frightened young woman fleeing her husband's family. She'd built a life beyond her wildest dreams, filled with love and purpose and joy. William, now in his mid-40s, remained strong and vital, still working the ranch with the same dedication he'd always shown. His hair had gone gray at the temples and lines crinkled around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Emma, he was as handsome as the day she'd first seen him silhouetted in that barn doorway. They celebrated their 20th anniversary with a large party attended by friends and family from across Kansas. Their children performed a play they'd written about their parents' courtship, taking considerable creative license but capturing the essential truth: a woman in desperate need and a man brave enough to help her, and the love that grew from that act of courage and kindness. Emma's speech at the party was simple but heartfelt. 20 years ago, I had nothing but fear and a baby in my arms. William gave me everything: safety, love, a home, and a family. He showed me what it means to be truly cared for, to be valued not for what I could provide, but simply for who I am. Every day with him has been a gift, and I look forward to spending the rest of my life by his side. William's response was characteristically brief. Emma brought light into my darkness and filled my empty house with love. She's been the best wife, the best mother, the best partner a man could ask for. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat, every moment from that day in the barn to this one right here. As the new century dawned in 1900, the Kane family looked toward the future with hope and confidence. The ranch was thriving. The children were happy and successful in their various pursuits, and Emma and William's love remained as strong as ever. Rose and her husband had recently given Emma and William their first grandchild, a little girl named Emma Rose after her grandmother. Emma held her namesake and marveled at the circle of life, at how this tiny baby represented everything she'd fought for all those years ago. She thought about Rose, the baby she'd protected so fiercely, now a mother herself. She thought about the family she'd run from and the family she'd found. "What are you thinking about?" William asked, coming to stand beside her and putting his arm around her waist. "About how far we've come," Emma said. "About how that terrified girl in the barn became this woman, with children and grandchildren and a life she loves. About how you made all of it possible." "We made it possible," William said, "together." And that was the truth of it. Together they'd built something beautiful and lasting from desperate circumstances. Together they'd created a legacy of love and courage that would carry forward through their children and grandchildren. Together they'd proved that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. Emma looked around at her family, gathered together in the home she and William had built, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude and joy. She'd been hiding her baby from a cruel family, running with no hope and nowhere to go. William had found her and said those words that changed everything: "They'll never find you here." He'd been right. The Jennings family had never found her at the Kane Ranch, but more than that, she'd found herself there. She'd found love and safety and purpose. She'd found a partner who valued her, children who brought her joy, and a life worth living. As the evening drew on and the family gathered around the dinner table, Emma caught William's eye across the crowded room. He smiled at her, That warm, steady smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. She smiled back, knowing without words what he was thinking, what he was feeling. They'd both been blessed beyond measure, given a second chance at life and love when they'd needed it most. And they'd taken that chance and turned it into something beautiful, something lasting, something that would endure for generations. The wild Kansas wind blew across the plains outside, but inside the Kane home, all was warm and peaceful and filled with love. Emma's journey from terror to triumph was complete. Her story one of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of genuine love. And as she sat down to dinner surrounded by her husband, her children, and her first grandchild, Emma knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every fearful moment, every desperate prayer had been worth it, because they'd all led her here, to this moment, to this life, to this family that would never have existed without that fateful day when a cowboy found a desperate woman hiding in his uncle's barn and offered her sanctuary. William had promised they'd never find her there. But what he'd really given her was so much more than a hiding place. He'd given her everything she'd never dared to hope for, and she would spend the rest of her days grateful for his courage, his kindness, and his love. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. There would be more grandchildren, more challenges, more joys and sorrows as life continued its inevitable march forward. But whatever came, Emma knew they would face it together, their love strong enough to weather any storm. And that, after everything, was the greatest gift of all.